guys already knew that already. It's week 17. What we don't know is how you feel about all these Bengals coming off a monster day in week 16. Now, I said I think you can start Joe Burrow this week against the Chiefs, but as the arbiter of starts and sits for us, do you concur, Adam?
Yeah, this wasn't a 1 week aberration for Joe Burrow. He's been excellent this season, and I understand the defense for the Chiefs is really good, and with a lot of quarterbacks, maybe we would have thought about sitting them. But Burrow has been the QB4 over the last 3 weeks. He's averaged over 330 passing yards per game over the last 4. That's the most in the NFL. I have a lot of confidence in Joey B. I think that, as Kimmy likes to say, he is the swaggiest quarterback in the NFL. So I'm going to fire him up. And I'm also going to fire up Kirk Cousins this week against the Green Bay Packers, who since week 11 has been the QB5. And the Packers defense starting to get healthy, starting to get some of their players back, but they've still allowed at least 2 touchdown passes per game in each of the last 5. So I think that this is still a pretty reasonable start for Kirk Cousins. If you've gotten this far with him, I don't see any other streamable option who would be better than Cousins at this point.
So those are the starts. On the other side of the ledger, who should you be sitting?
Well, I think we need to sit Ryan Tannehill, the de facto goal line back for the Tennessee Titans. I think he's an excellent quarterback. I'm still taking the Titans to win this game, but he's averaged 13 fantasy points per game without Derrick Henry this season. The Dolphins have allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this year. And we saw, Ian Book's not a real good, example of what they're capable of, but still you want to keep him on the bench. And then I look at Russell Wilson. He's got the Detroit Lions this week, which, you think that Detroit's a good matchup, but they've allowed just one quarterback to top 20 fantasy points in their last 8 games. And Wilson's averaging just over 13 fantasy points per game since week 10. The weather in Seattle is not going to be great. We saw it on Sunday in that game against the Chicago Bears. So that leads me to believe they're going to run the ball an awful lot. So I got to avoid Russell Wilson. I don't like to do it, but that's where we are.
Well, between the weather and the fact that the Lions' run defense has been pretty vulnerable, it might be a wise decision to kind of stay away from Russ. So those are the quarterbacks. On the wide receiver end of things, who should folks consider starting?
Well, I'm going to go with Christian Kirk against the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys, they played pretty well defensively. We saw what they did last week against the football team, but Christian Kirk has averaged 14 fantasy points per game in the 5 contests without DeAndre Hopkins. He's had at least 9 targets in back-to-back games. Volume-wise, in a game that I expect the Cardinals to be trailing, I got to take that chance with him, even though it could end up blowing up in my face. But one matchup I don't think I need to worry about is A.J. Brown going up against the Miami Dolphins. Last week, there was a lot of question marks. Are we starting A.J. Brown? What do we do? I'm like, of course we're starting him. You got to be a lunatic not to. He had 16 targets. Over 50% of the target share. He's had at least 27 plus fantasy points in 3 out of his last 6 games. I'm not sure he gets that this week against the Dolphins, but I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 targets. He's going to have around 8 receptions, get close to 80 yards. Then you're just hoping for the touchdown. I think A.J. Brown's a great start.
On the other side, you have one of your sits here was a guy who last year felt like an automatic start. This year, he's been kind of anything but.
Well, yeah, if you've seen the quarterback play for the Washington football team, Terry McLaurin is a player that you're going to want to avoid. He's averaged less than 6 fantasy points per game since week 12. That would make him the wide receiver 88. And the Eagles have allowed one top 30 wide receiver only once in the last 6 games. So this is actually an easy sit for me, even though he's a brand name. He's somebody that I wish could enter the NFL transfer portal. But unfortunately, he's stuck in Washington. So what are we going to do? Also, we like Joe Burrow. We're starting him. Tyler Boyd, though, I'm going to have to put on the bench. He's had 100 receiving yards only once in his last 23 games. One of these Bengals wide receivers is going to pop, be it T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. Kansas City has allowed only two guys to break double digits in 3 of their games this season. They've been really good. They've allowed 10 or fewer points to opposing offenses in the last 4 of their last 5 games. So they're playing well. I still trust starting Joe Burrow and the big name wide receivers, but it's Tyler Boyd who's really concerning me.
He's just been so inconsistent. So I certainly understand in a big week, maybe shying away from him a little bit.